Oh my lord, ChatGPT is going to take all of our jobs!
Hello, sorcerers. You may have guessed by that opener that I'm going to talk about ChatGPT and other AI chatbots in this video, specifically about using those tools and services and applying them to your job right now. Not the future, not 6 months from now, today. Can these tools be used to help you in your day-to-day job? Spoiler, the answer is yes. I'm going to specifically talk about using these in a procurement function because that's what I do for a living. But you can easily see in the examples that I'm going to share that you can figure out other ways to leverage a ChatGPT or maybe Google's Bard, we'll talk about that in a second, in your everyday tasks, especially if you are an office worker. If you're doing retail, maybe not. That's probably not going to work. Maybe. But if you're sitting behind a computer all day, you're going to find something useful out of these tools. Let's get started. As a person who reads, edits, and writes contracts a good portion of my day and within my life, the first thing that I checked ChatGPT to see if it can do was actually write a contract. When I first started using ChatGPT, it didn't even dawn on me to ask it to do that. And I'm not sure why, because in other videos where I've discussed the tools, I said that it's really good at creating lists and really good at kind of creating templates for you, but it didn't click. I was messing around with it the other night. I'll overlay while I'm talking. I was messing around with it the other night and I said, I wonder if this thing can write a contract. And it could. Now, I'm not going to say that it was the best contract I've ever read or a good like the best contract template. And I think, I'm not entirely sure if as I kept refining my search and refining my questions and asks of it, if the iterations got better because of the line of questioning, or if it's just because of the way I wrote the one particular question. But at some point, I did get it to produce a multi-term, it's probably 8 pages of contract language, specifically for a platform as a service contract. And it was solid. It wasn't the best thing that I've ever seen in my life as far as a contract goes. Most of my contracts are longer in my world, but that it also had me thinking, maybe this is an entryway to get to leaner contract language. It's an experiment. It's good to vet and bounce ideas off of this thing. I also have access to Google's Bard AI solution, and I asked it to do the same thing. I have to say that so far, Google's Bard solution is not nearly as good as ChatGPT for the same functions and tasks. So I asked it to write me a contract. It gave me general contract concepts, but it did not actually write the template for me. There was a couple of other examples where I did a side-by-side test, and I have to say that Bard didn't do as well. There's one thing that I tried, and I didn't record this. You can ask Bard via Google to give you a summary of a YouTube video, like this one right now. If this goes too long and you don't want to watch a 10 to 15 minute video about me talking about Chat AI, Bard will give a summary of the video. I saw someone else using some version of ChatGPT. There's some plugin that you can turn on in your browser that apparently will also do that, but natively in the normal ChatGPT website, it cannot do that. If you give it a YouTube URL and say, summarize this video for me, it says it can't, but there is some kind of backend tool that lets you do that. Once I got ChatGPT to give me a contract template, I started to think about the other things that I do in my job, and that's a lot of research about suppliers. In one of my previous ChatGPT videos that I did, I mentioned that ChatGPT does not have updated information. So if I asked, and I will also overlay this, give me an overview of, let's say, a company like Accenture's the last 5 years of revenue, it's going to come up short because it only has information at least through 2021. There might be some 2022 data loaded into that. So that actually is a situation where Bard did a little bit better because it's using Google's active information and it's doing some other kind of search where it will give you a 5-year overview. ChatGPT will use the information that it has, but it doesn't have as much up-to-date current information. So that's something to consider. But another thing that I did, and I actually think this is pretty interesting, and I think this is applicable for other things other than procurement. I have been trying to immerse myself in some of the emerging technologies that are happening in the healthcare industry. And it's a bit of a struggle because these things are hybrids. They're sort of technology, they're sort of services, and they don't neatly fit into certain categories and commodities. And when things don't fit into those types of categories and commodities, it's hard to manage them as a group. It's hard to build a strategy around a commodity if these things are individual use. So I have been working with, big research companies like a Gartner's and stuff like that to give me purviews and quadrants and information about some of these companies. And I just decided to ask ChatGPT if it can give me an overview of the major suppliers in like wellness technology. And it did spit out some really good comparative analysis. It initially gave me 5 or 6, and then I asked it for more, and it gave me another 5 or 6. So I know that those suppliers actually do fit in that space, and I was pretty impressed with what it gave me. And then I gave it some follow-up questions. That's how I got into the revenue and the overall year-to-year spend and profit margin. Those questions it didn't answer so great because it didn't have all the updated information. But that competitive analysis, just understanding some of these lists, was helpful because that information hasn't been produced by some larger firms that you pay good money to get this type of stuff for. The way that I view a ChatGPT or a Bard is really an augmented search. If I type in for specific information, instead of it sending me an article, it's summarizing a bunch of information. Now, I've mentioned, again, I keep saying this, I've mentioned before that I don't always trust the sources, and I don't always trust especially with ChatGPT. Google's Bard, another advantage for that is it does provide sources, and you can turn it into a Google search and find the information that it's attempting to link from. So that is helpful, but I do find, because I haven't really asked it anything that I'm not knowledgeable about, I find that ChatGPT's results for very specific things, again, things that are not hypothetical or controversial, the information's been pretty good. And I've been impressed with the output. So if I ask for summaries of books, because again, I've been doing a lot of videos about books that I've read, and I'm like, oh, just give me like a summary of the talking points of that book, because I am not constantly taking notes while I'm reading them. And a lot of times I do audiobooks, and I'm physically exercising while I'm listening to the books. So that's really helpful. And it does a good job. I know that information is right. And it's the same thing with some of these, with the contract template. I'm not saying that it's the best contract template that I've ever seen, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't wrong. It would certainly need to be beefed up fairly considerably for my line of work, but it's a starting point. If you're stuck and you don't know where to start with something, that ChatGPT really helps. It gets you moving. It gives you something to start to work with and start to build a framework around and to pad information onto. So, whatever you're doing, I even asked it to write me an angry letter to a supplier that I'm managing. And I just got very upset with them, and I was like, maybe I can ask the ChatGPT to write up a format for a letter, and it's a little bit more emotionless. It's a little bit more neutral, and I can use that and then start to feather in some specific examples. It was okay, right? It was something to start with. I would say that ChatGPT right now, in its current iteration, definitely has functionality that could help you in a day-to-day way. Either helping you draft email responses, helping you draft a core template for like a narrative. If I have to tell a story, if I have to give a presentation, it will help you figure out the main points of a topic. And then you really need to take the responsibility to add more content, context, and I would say sources. Make sure the data is right and do the research. But it helps if you're stuck. It helps if you need some help to get moving on a response or a strategy or a presentation. It has enough know-how to get you to that starting point. So I'm not saying take what it does absolutely wholesale and just copy and paste it. Take it, flesh it out, add more of your own personal opinions, add more research that you've done, and you have a very powerful tool. So I'm a big fan of ChatGPT. I'm a big fan of these AI bots that are starting to come out, especially for typical office worker activities. I think this thing is already game changing. It's going to be game changing in 6 months or a year. It's helping right now. And I am actually very curious to see if I could take it a step further. I'd mentioned there are plugins like for YouTube where a ChatGPT will give you a summary of a YouTube video without having to watch the whole thing. I'm wondering if there are other technologies where I can train it to read a contract. If I can train it to read contracts that I've done iterative approaches to, and it can build a repository of alternative language that we've already worked on, and I could just say, hey, give me 3 options for this particular term or this particular section based on the previous examples that I fed you. I don't know if something like that exists, but I also can't imagine that it doesn't exist. Somebody has to have done that before. So if you know about something like that, my sorcerers or my procurement fans, or some AI and technology fans out there, if you know something about like, a ChatGPT or another AI bot that kind of does more legal things and contracts, let me know about it. I'm really interested. This thing works, and I actually think that you should try to use it in your day-to-day job to see if it actually helps you. I would also add, don't put anything confidential in there. Just, not that it's going to know anything confidential per se, but don't feed it confidential information or paste confidential information into the chat. But if you're just trying to get some basic information that may be available on the internet, but this thing will correlate it and present it in such a way that it's going to be more efficient and you don't have to go through 15 different websites to get the information. It condenses it all into one simple text. Why not, people? Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you found it interesting. I hope that you found it encouraging. Try new things. Try the technology. It's not going to hurt anything. Not right now. Try it. And again, thank you for watching. I hope this helps. Have a great day. I'll be back with another video in 2 weeks. Oh no! ChatGPT is going to take all of our jobs.